Unfortunately, we're missing some absolutely key people. Carla Suarez-Weiser, as many of you know, the new CEO of Cochrane, is off on a very well-deserved break to be geared up for the explosive year of 2026 for Cochrane. Other people like Zoe Jordan, also critically involved in all of this work, not able to be here today. But we did have a lot of conversation before today to talk about what we wanted to cover. And Carla, Zoe, and others asked if I could summarize succinctly what I think we've achieved in 2025. Then I'll pass it back to Laura, Lawrence, and others to move on to agenda item 2. And then I'm going to come back in and be very, very concrete about things to be alert to that will be happening in 2026 that we hope will create a lot of opportunities for many of you. So the next slide, you'll recognize this as a Zoe slide. She wanted to start with gratitude, and I think we would all say that we're incredibly grateful to all of you. Between January to June, all of you, or many of you on the line, did an extraordinary amount of work to an incredibly high standard and did it really rapidly in a way that enabled the funder interest group executive then to move on and decide how to, in the short run, begin to allocate resources to deliver on the extraordinary vision that was agreed to in Cape Town. So thank you to all of you. If we move on to the next slide, Carla, Zoe, many people thought it would be helpful to summarize what we achieved, first from a process perspective. So a really robust, really fast-paced planning process that engaged many hundreds of people. Many of you are on the line today. Thank you again. Many outputs along the way, 5 working groups, 1 planning group, each producing 5 reports for 30 in total landmark reports, as well as many, many other publications. Thanks to our African colleagues, an incredibly well-organized, high-energy consensus meeting in Cape Town, and then the finalization of the roadmap, thanks to the leadership of Carrie, Andrea, and Will, among many other contributors. Many, many webinars. I think when I look back, I was probably involved in about 150 alone. I know many of you were involved in many others. We have a website that, at least with its 1 page, tries to keep people aware of developments, although that will be built out very early in 2026 with a lot more detail. And finally, thanks to Laura's leadership, a lot of support for early career people through mentorship and educational opportunities. So lots of achievements from a process perspective. If we move to the next slide, when I think about the outcomes, I ended up zeroing in on 4, and this is my personal take. We'd warmly welcome your thoughts about what are some of the other outcomes that you think we achieved. I think the one that I'm the most proud of is the first one. I feel like we have now a community of communities committed to a collective impact approach to learning from others, using evidence synthesis to improve lives. And those communities range from the Global SDG Synthesis Coalition, 45 UN entities. We have Carrie, Shiv, and others here from that world. The largest producers of evidence synthesis from around the globe, Cochrane, JBI, Campbell, but many, many others. Key networks of evidence intermediaries, the science advisors, the evidence support units, and 35 and a growing number of funders of the 4 types that you'll see there in brackets, really excited about this vision and now trying to work out how they can contribute to and benefit from this. So outcome 1, community of communities. Outcome 2, I think we have successfully made the case that we need to get the balance right between rigor and speed, although we need all of you to keep emphasizing this point. Evidence synthesis has for a long time given us rigor in learning from scientific studies and UN and other evaluations. AI has come along in these last few years offering the promise of speed. We think there's a really strong case that AI-enabled living evidence syntheses are the best way to deliver localized, actionable insights with both rigor and speed. The third outcome that I think is really important to celebrate is our collective commitment to shifting power to the Global South and locating equity at the heart of each step in ESIC's development. I think this came together throughout the planning process. It really kind of was so well articulated in Cape Town as a governing principle, and the fact that it has stood the test of time through the remainder of this year and remains front and center in everybody's thinking now, I think is an extraordinary achievement. And the last outcome that I'll highlight is mobilizing 126 million. We're very optimistic that number is going to rise substantially in 2026. And the funder interest group had the very difficult challenge of looking at the roadmap with all of those inspiring solutions and say, where do we put the money in year one that will give us the most essential pieces that will start to achieve impacts on the ground? And how do we start to put in place transitional arrangements as we move from the planning process into ESIC being operationalized in the field? So if we go on to the next slide, these are the 5 foundational investments. So the funder interest group executive, again, had to look at that long list of solutions and say, where do we drill down for year one? And these are the 5 domains that they selected. When you read some of the details in how this is being operationalized, almost all of the points here are moving towards. So when I come to near the end of the webinar, what will happen in 2026, things are really going to start to become concrete and there will be usable pieces of the infrastructure. The 2 year one investments that are becoming the most tangible currently are the sectoral hubs. So in a way, we have one for climate solutions already with Destiny. We have 4 more coming online through the UKRI-funded METIUS. You'll see the 4 domains that are listed there. We have conversations fairly advanced with some of the spokes in the Health Hub, including the one focused on health emergencies. And more, we're hearing people say, how do I foreshadow ESIC in calls when I'm writing proposals to make clear the need to leverage and contribute to this infrastructure and help us to move us to full coverage? The second year one investment that has got the most focus over this last while has been the open data system. So many on the line will have been part of 3 open data system touch points that have happened over the last 2 months. A lot of really exciting work happening to prepare us to have synthesis-ready data, AI-ready data that many of us then can quickly reanalyze, that can feed into processes like best buys. And that conversation has happened across sectors with the support of a number of funders, but also with the leadership of the ACOBS Foundation. They have been supporting a minimum viable product specific to the education sector. And as this open data system starts to become concrete, people are saying to us, great, this needs to feed into next generation research and evaluation. So we have better research going into syntheses in future. We want to build it into workflows. The multilateral development banks are keen to build it into their diagnostic and project analysis workflows. The research funders keen to build it into their peer review processes and their research impact assessment work. The other year one investments, you're going to hear about this again when we come to coming in 2026. These will start to reach fruition then. The regional hubs moving us towards support for contextualization down to that national and local level where all the real decisions and the impacts on people's lives are felt. The living inventory, this will help us to make an informed choice about which AI tool we use for a particular task. It will also up our game in how we report transparently about why we use the tools that we use. And we are also moving towards procurement of a monitoring, evaluation, and learning infrastructure that will help us with accountability, but also with learning and improvement cycles. So as of now, not that much that is immediately usable, but really important steps. And again, if you think about in June, we had a long list of solutions. Now we have these very concrete year one investments. They're moving us towards a world where we'll have the best evidence at our fingertips very quickly. And again, I'll come back to how we'll operationalize that early in 2026. On the next slide, and this is my last one before I turn it back to Laura and others, this is just about some preparatory work to gear up for year 2 foundational investment. So there was a really inspiring conversation that happened in Lisbon in October. The question to the Cochrane methods groups, which are often combined Cochrane-Campbell methods groups, was, could you unite around a shared agenda of methods transformation, a whole-scale transformation that gets us to a world of policy scale, AI-enabled living evidence syntheses on all the big questions of our time? And I was thrilled to hear a resounding yes. So whether you're working in co-production or risk of bias assessment or grade or other aspects of the methods in synthesis, how do we work towards that shared agenda of methods transformation? And then finally, the other pieces that have clicked into place in 2025, three of the transitional arrangements, funder interest group, the 5 early mover funders making these decisions for now as a group about how to move from the roadmap to the foundational investments, a steering group, which met for the first time yesterday, 6 leaders from every region around the world, bringing many forms of evidence and other diversity perspectives or diverse perspectives to the table who will help us govern for collective impact. And 25 leaders from around the globe will have received an invitation in the last 10 days to be the first people joining the Communities Council that will help us strategically coordinate for collective impact. So we'll just end by saying we're co-building a more fit-for-purpose evidence synthesis infrastructure. It's hugely exciting. It's also very scary, and we've made a lot of progress just in these 6 months since Cape Town. And we're trying really hard to work within a collective impact approach. And I think most of us would now say this is really hard work. It's a day-to-day commitment, and it requires really tough conversations as we move from the equilibrium that many of us have been in for a very long time to a new and exciting equilibrium. But those types of changes can be very hard and a bit anxiety-provoking, but we think it's going to be really worth it in the long run. So a lot accomplished in 2025. I'll come back at the end of the webinar with all of the exciting things to be alert to in 2026 that will really start to deliver the changes on the ground that we all hope for. We took a lot of really important steps in the second half of 2025, but things are going to become very concrete, we hope, very fast with ESIC in 2026. So I'm just going to walk you through some things to be paying attention to. So the first thing is there will be an open call for 5 new sectoral hubs posted in February. And you'll see the proposed focus of those 5 hubs, 1 on economic growth, a 2nd on food systems, a 3rd on humanitarian assistance, a 4th on peace and effective institutions, and a 5th on social protection. And given that the funding for these 5 new hubs will come from the Wellcome Trust, it won't be a surprise that there will be an expectation that in addition to using sector-specific frameworks and looking at sector-specific outcomes, there will also be a health determinants and health outcomes lens brought to bear with these 5 sectoral hubs. If you add this to the Destiny project focused on climate solutions, some of the nascent spokes in the health hub and spoke model, and then the 4 sectoral hubs coming online through Metius, this will then bring us to 11 sectoral hubs by the time that this competition has concluded. So keep your eye on the Wellcome Trust website for that posting of that open call for 5 new hubs. When it comes to the regional hubs, the plan for 2026 is to begin with support for existing regional networks of evidence intermediaries in Africa, then separately in Latin America and the Caribbean. That will be supported through the Wellcome Trust. And UKRI is also exploring funding for a sub-regional network for Europe. The reason why we call it sub-regional is we're using the UN classification of regions, and the region that Europe is included in is usually covering both Europe and Central Asia. For now, with their limited funds, UKRI is focusing on a sub-regional network for Europe, but the hope is this will grow over time to full coverage of that UN region. The third area with the open data system, you'll see, and maybe if I remember now to hit enter in the chat box, you'll see a link to a call that I believe just went live yesterday from the What Works Hub for Global Education. This is on behalf of the Jacobs Foundation and partners. This is an open call for evidence intermediaries, particularly those based in low middle income countries, to test and shape an early stage evidence repository. This is that minimum viable product that I referred to before, while producing high impact policy or practice relevant synthesis and translation to support education decision making. So if you are interested in evidence based in a low and middle income country, this is a new opportunity for funding that just went live yesterday. Another piece of work that's happening with the open data system is the Funder Interest Group executive extended an invitation to 7 individuals, each of whom represent a different category of data owner, to come together to draft a proposal for how the open data system will work. For those of you who've been participating in the touch points focused on the open data system, you'll know that there's a document about the 9 types of issues that we believe need to be worked through. 2 are listed here: governance and revenue sharing. This group of 7, with support from Wellcome Trust experts who bring legal perspectives, open data expertise, and others, they will work through a proposal for how this open data system could work. Hopefully a proposal that will work for all of you. By mid-March, that draft should be shareable, and then we'll be engaging all of you in a conversation about, will this work for you? Is this an arrangement that would lead you to want to contribute data, to use data, and so on? There will also then be bilateral discussions in the second half of March and throughout April with each group of data owners to talk about, is this a viable proposal from your perspective? What would be need to be changed in order to make it a workable solution? With the living inventory of AI digital evidence synthesis tools, there's going to be a procurement process for this work for a group based in the Global South to lead. This process will likely be posted in Q2, so sometime in the April to June window, but Isabel Fletcher and her Wellcome colleagues are juggling many other procurement and open call type processes, so they will see exactly when they can slot this in. And the final piece is the monitoring, evaluation, learning infrastructure. This is the piece that will be pushed off the farthest into this year 1 of foundational investments. The process for this likely to be posted in Q3 of 2026. So already an open call from the What Works Hub for Global Education, a call to be posted in February for the sectoral hubs, other procurement processes coming online, in all cases an expectation around Global South leadership, but many opportunities for all of you to potentially be part of these responses. We go on to the next slide, which is the final one for me before I introduce Isabel and some other colleagues. The Funder Interest Group executive, of course, is already thinking forward to possible year 2 foundational investments. So they will continue to go back to the roadmap to see what is the logical next set of foundational investments to make. But it won't be a surprise that these 3 are currently on the list as contenders. That methods transformation that I talked about before, what would it look like to enable that transformation? Additional sectoral hubs. So we still have some orphans that won't be covered by the 11 proposed hubs. One is one focused on housing, transportation, and other community amenities. We also have other regions where we want to make sure there are regional hubs. Asia Pacific and the Arab states, or sometimes called Middle East and North Africa, would be obvious contenders for the next wave of regional hubs. And there is a strong commitment to move towards a global secretariat. And one of the responsibilities of that secretariat could be planning for an in-person working meeting that brings together the community of communities. And individual groups may want to bracket that meeting with optional meetings on their part. But there are many other solutions embedded in the roadmap, the Evidence Synthesis Studio, many others. So all of those will be getting another look to say, will this be a priority for year 2? Then the other pieces, the transitional arrangements, the Funder Interest Group will continue to help us fund for collective impact. They're also gearing up to engage each of 4 types of funders in the next wave of fundraising. National funders trying to meet their own domestic evidence needs, international assistance funders, philanthropic funders, and finally the research funders, each of whom see different value propositions in ESIC, so they need their own unique conversations. The steering group, which again just met for the first time yesterday, they will start to help us govern for collective impact. And we're really excited that the Communities Council will start to meet early in 2025. A number of you on the call today have received invitations to join this. And as additional peer review process identify additional leaders of ESIC infrastructure, those new leaders will also be invited to join the Communities Council. So just a reminder at the bottom, we're trying to co-build this together. We're using a collective impact approach. It's hard. We take 2 steps forward, we learn, we step back, we take some more steps forward together. But I think 2026 is going to be the year where this starts to really come alive in very tangible ways and really changes how many of us go about our work and really ups the prospects for significant impacts on decision making.